I guess I'll call myself a reform teacher. That's what I feel I am. Um, and I guess I was a product of an education system, both obviously because I'm French and I grew up in France, first in France and then in the UK, because I also did some of my studying in the UK, and really started my career in education, in my early 20s, teaching languages, believing in the system and never questioning it, and just going with what, this is what we do, this is how we are trained to be teachers. What I think is really interesting about my career in education is, sorry, I've got a whole overview of teaching languages from nurseries into primaries, into secondaries, further education, adult education, and higher education, which is where my career has sort of ended up the last 8 years. Um, and back then, I didn't realize that because I was a product of the system, I had a tendency to view the students as people who literally need us to do something to them, which is, it seems so hilarious to me now when I look at where I am in my thinking. Through COVID, I was a full-time working mum. I'd always been a full-time working mum, dedicated teacher, believing in the system, who is now faced with two boys, one in year 5, one in year 7. So you can imagine when you're working full time, trying to homeschool, doing this boring stuff, but also the fact that particularly for Tom, so Tom felt overwhelmed and he didn't know how to handle the work. So we spent a lot of time trying to teach him the time management skills and like, how do you deconstruct things? And, so I was using the analogy of, okay, if I give you a cake, how would you eat it? And it's like, well, I get first a knife, yeah, great. And then what? And then you cut it in little pieces, and it's like, okay. So like, well, you're going to do the same with your work. So I spent a lot of time teaching the boys effectively skills, but with Jack, much more building him up. So the conversation I was having with Jack was like, I don't want to do this. This is boring. I'm rubbish. I'm crap at learning. Those were the words that were coming out. Like, I am not clever. It was just heartbreaking hearing him say that. So we spent 2 years through COVID where I helped Jack develop more of an interest into like, learning is about like what interests me, but also more self-esteem. And has led me to all us as a family to make the decision to deregister Thomas, our eldest, and to, for Tom to become a home educated, because that's what he wanted to do. And it is really exciting and positive in the sense that the journey that Tom and I have been on, phenomenal. I mean, the change in Thomas makes me well up. It's so beautiful. It's like I've taken my son out of his cage. And I'm watching him stretch those wings and finding those wings. But I'm also getting to know my son. My goodness, I didn't know him. And it's just so awesome. I was a full-time working mum and my priority was work. And suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, who are you? Because I don't think I know you. So I've really noticed, and he's getting into that sort of like discovering who he is. And it's an emergent thing, right? Flourishing is not the beauty of flourishing is that it looks different on all individuals, but it's also fluctuation. So it's not static. You're not, you don't reach flourishing and that's that. It's but what he's really discovering is discovering this innate well-being in him, and what he needs and what he wants to do. So he's really tapping in his curiosity and that intrinsic motivation. So has the journey been plain sailing? Absolutely not. Um, the first month and a bit, I spent a lot of time crying my eyes out and rocking in the corner of my office. And I'm so grateful for Joe and Matt, and like, and welcoming us in their fold, in the fold of the dojo in Bristol, and really making us feel like we part of this community. It's been amazing. And I cringe when I think about that teacher I was 2 years ago. Because before I used to think, hey, I was a lecturer, right? It's in the name. You lecture, you stand in the front, you're the sage on the stage, and you fill those empty buckets. Oh God, it just makes me cringe. Like, how embarrassing that I used to think that. And now I've made a side move. I'm simply like the the guide on the side. I'm just holding that space. Like, what happens when you hold that space for the magic to unfold?